Alright guys, so I watched the second Joker movie. Joker, Folie, Deux, is the technical name of the movie. That's exactly how it's pronounced. Um, if you don't know, by the way, I am a victim of a hurricane. My town has been without power. uh, However, I've been like recording stuff off of my phone and just kind of uploading them whenever I get the chance. I am now in a place where I can pretty reliably get to a place that has internet, so I should be able to upload stuff more consistently. So, anyways, just bear in mind with the quality of this video, I am again just recording it off of my phone. In any case, Joker, that's the name of the movie. Uh, I actually liked it. um, Here's the thing. In a lot of ways, this movie is what it is. It is a sequel that was made because the first movie made $1 billion. The first Joker was always supposed to be a standalone movie. It was never supposed to have a sequel. It was never supposed to be a part of a franchise. It was always just this like it was like the Todd Phillips's like little magnum opus that he'd been dreaming up, and he finally managed to make it. Finally managed to convince WB to make it, and it was always supposed to be standalone. But then the little bitch had to just go and make $1 billion, and when that happens, it's like, oh well, yeah, I guess we'll make another one. Um, and so I will say up front. By the way, I'm going to go into spoilers because this review is coming out late. I will say up front, there are inherent problems that come with that in my opinion end up like diminishing the first movie. So I think the main one is just the fact that the first movie was very we'll say inspired by Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. Because of that, it has an unreliable narrator in Arthur Fleck, and you get to the end and it's like, oh, what was real? Was it all in his mind? Oh, it's vague. The ending is vague. And then this movie, because it's a sequel, it kind of has to be like, okay, well, we have to confirm some stuff. So yes, he did actually kill everybody. He actually killed Robert De Niro. Like, all of that actually happened. And so, you know, in some respects, it does kind of diminish the first movie, where it's like there's like less so the whole thing of like, was it all in his mind? you know. Um, but moving beyond that, moving past that, moving past just like the fact that this is a sequel that wasn't really calling for it to be made beyond the financial realities, I actually think that Todd Phillips like told the logical next step of Arthur Fleck's story. So I feel like the one major thing that I think is driving a lot of the negativity towards this movie is the fact that I think people fundamentally misunderstood the first Joker movie. And it's that Arthur Fleck is not the Joker. Arthur Fleck was never the Joker. Arthur Fleck was never going to be the Joker. Like, beyond like Todd Phillips like saying in interviews that Arthur Fleck is not the Joker. Like, he's come out and said this. Beyond any of that, if you just look at the contents of the last movie, Arthur Fleck is not a criminal mastermind. Arthur Fleck is not a thought leader. Arthur Fleck is not gonna be like making wacky gadgets and fighting Batman. Like, who Arthur Fleck was, he and who he is, well, was in the sense that he died in Joker Folie 2, but who Arthur Fleck was a psychologically damaged person who was abused by society and the people closest to him, who was abandoned, by by the government and their institutions and healthcare, yada yada yada. That's who Arthur Fleck is. His actions, right, like the things that he did, may have inspired the Joker movement, and I think, as we see in Joker Folie 2, inspired maybe the guy at the end who stabs him to become the actual Joker. Maybe it's somebody else. That part is still admittedly a little vague, although I feel like it's probably the guy that's doing the Heath Ledger origin story. But Arthur Fleck himself was never the Joker, and I do think that is just like at a baseline just the fundamental disconnect that people are having with this movie, where I've seen a surprising amount of people going into Joker Folie Deux expecting to see Arthur Fleck like become the actual Joker. And I mean, I don't like, I'm not like, I don't begrudge anybody for feeling that way, because at the end of the day, like, the movie is called Joker. Like, I could kind of see how you might get the impression from the first movie that he was going to become the Joker, but I would encourage you to go back and watch that first movie. I would encourage you to go to listen to some of Todd Phillips' interviews. And I think you'll come to realize that that was never going to happen. Like, that's just not what this franchise is about. So I do think that just initial disconnect that people have is something that I personally didn't have, because when I watched the first Joker movie, what I got out of it was that, oh, this guy isn't the Joker. This guy might be the catalyst to, sort of this uprising in Gotham that, creates the situation and the environment to where the Joker can birth, but he's not the Joker himself. And so I never went into this movie expecting like the clown prince of crime. Never went into it expecting that. The other part that I know people have issue with is the whole musical angle to it. And again, this is also one of those things where it's like, I feel like this isn't even all that disparate from what they did in the first movie. Like, in the first movie, we have not musical scenes, but like we have like theatrical scenes where, and when I say theatrical, I mean like musical theater-esque scenes where like the Joker's dancing and, he's dancing in the bathroom. I remember that one scene. There's obviously the scene where he's dancing in the stairs. It's like the first movie already established that Joker goes into a performance, and like he uses that. He used dance to like escape his reality and, go into this fantasy world where he can be happy and whatnot. So it's like, I feel like them leaning into that more and actually just doing some like musical set pieces is not like this radical thing, this radical change for this movie that is completely dissimilar from the first movie. I actually feel like it's kind of in line with what they already did in the first movie. But again, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I understand why it may or may not be for you. You know what I mean? But yeah. And then, yeah, I guess the other big controversial thing is the ending, right? People, although I guess it kind of actually, it ties into what I mentioned first, where Arthur Fleck isn't the Joker. I guess a lot of people are mad that he never became the Joker. And not only that, they're mad because he gets killed. But I feel like that just makes a lot of sense, right? As I mentioned before, he may have started and inspired the Joker uprising, but he himself is not the Joker. For me, it makes sense that the people that were radicalized by his actions to ultimately look at Arthur Fleck and be disappointed in him. I guess it's actually funny because it kind of mirrors like the real world expectations for this movie, where like people were looking for Todd Phillips to make a Joker movie, and Todd Phillips is just kind of much like Arthur Fleck in that courtroom scene where he's like, "I'm not the Joker, baby. I'm just Arthur Fleck." And then he kind of looks at the audience the same way that Joker looks at Harley and be like, "You used to love me though, right?" And it's just like, "No, I don't. I don't want you for you. I don't want you for you, Todd Phillips. I want you for the IP that we want you to make, even though you don't want to make that, even though that's not who you are." It's actually very funny how meta this all is. And I guess this actually ties into Lady or Harley as a character. I liked what they did with Harley too. I actually liked that it's basically the inverse of the traditional Joker and Harley relationship, where traditionally Joker manipulates Harley into following him down his path of insanity and mischief and whatnot. But here we're seeing at the beginning of the movie, like, Arthur Fleck is just Arthur Fleck. You know, he's this damaged individual that's just kind of hanging out in prison. And he finds somebody that likes him, right, in Harley, but she doesn't like him for him. She likes him for the Joker persona. And so he decides to put it on to try to appease her. And then he realizes that it's not who I am. And again, it just kind of ties into what we've been talking about, where he's ultimately disappointed because she doesn't love him for him. She loved him for his persona. And so she's like manipulating and pushing him into being the Joker. So I really like the inverse. And I gotta say as well, you know, just from a visual perspective, from cinematography and stuff, it's still just as, you know, visually stunning as the first Joker movie. There's clearly like maybe you may or may not, or you may hate this movie, but I don't think you can necessarily deny that there are a lot of talented people working on this. They didn't just phone it in as far as the visuals are concerned. And you know, it's just, I am always going to call out and appreciate whenever a comic book movie doesn't look like a Saturday Night Live sketch. You know, like even Deadpool and Wolverine, which I enjoyed, I gave that movie a positive review. One of my big gripes about it is that it continues the MCU tradition of looking like you're just standing in front of the volume. Even though allegedly they actually went out on location and shot in the desert, why does it not look like that? Like, why don't you look like Furiosa? You could have looked like Furiosa, but you did it. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine anymore. No, this movie is shot gorgeously. The performances are great. Obviously, Joaquin Phoenix is great, but I will say Joaquin Phoenix just kind of does more of the same. Like, he doesn't necessarily do anything all that new or innovative in this, although it doesn't necessarily have to, but I'm just saying that I do think that will keep him from being nominated again, just because I think the Academy voters are probably going to be like, we've seen it before. I also, again, I think that Lady Gaga's good with what she's given, but I don't think that she even necessarily gets the opportunity to like have a really showy performance that I think would attract Academy recognition. I also, you know, obviously the movie isn't being as received as well as the first one was. So yeah, I don't think that Lady Gaga's going to get nominated either, even though I think they're both very good. Like, I think they're about as good as they can be. And yeah, you know, the other thing I will say, this isn't even really a complaint about the movie, but it is just something that I want to talk about. Even though I like the movie and I talk about how beautiful the movie is, I have no idea why this movie costs like $200 million. Hollywood has a massive spending problem. Like, this movie is underperforming, and one of the main reasons why it's underperforming is because they spent $200 fucking million on it. Why? There's no reason why this movie should cost that much money. Like, it's not on the screen. Like, I understand that, you know, Joaquin Phoenix got a massive payday. Apparently, he made like $50 million. I read that Lady Gaga got like $12 million. That still leaves you with like $140 million. Like, okay, let's say that Todd Phillips also got a massive paycheck. We'll say maybe he got paid like $30 million. I don't know, $40 million. You still have $100 million left over to make this movie. This doesn't look like $100 million movie. Like, most of this movie takes place either in the asylum or in a courtroom. Hollywood has a massive spending problem, and it's their own fault as to why this movie is underperforming. Like, if they had just done the first movie again, even though this movie is doing not nearly as well as the first, probably still would have made money. They probably still would have been fine. You know, if they had made this movie for like, I think they made the first movie for like $50 million. If they had found a way to make this movie for like $70 million, $80 million, they would still be fine probably. But they, for some godforsaken reason, decided to spend $200 million on this. Now they probably need to make like at least $500 million just to break even. And by the way, I know Todd Phillips is like, why do the fans care about the budgets and whatnot? And even a lot of audience members are like, why do you guys talk about budget so much? And it's just like, if Hollywood keeps overspending on these movies, they are either going to, there are only two ways to solve this problem. You either have to spend less money making your movies, or they're going to charge us more on the tickets. So yes, I'm going to talk about it, and yes, I'm going to advocate for them to spend less on these movies. The other thing I want to touch on real quick is I think because there's always like the culture war aspect about it. It's stupid, but I'm seeing a lot of people with like the conspiracy theory that like, oh, Hollywood and the elites, and they're mad because the wrong audience, the chuds, liked the first Jonkler movie, and now they made this movie in order to, lash out at the fans. And it's just like, you guys are literally fighting ghosts in the walls and in the paintings. It's like, yeah, there's nothing about this movie that even indicates that. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I sincerely don't know what people are talking about when they say that. Like, I feel like I've done a good enough job throughout the video describing how everything established in the first movie makes perfect sense from a narrative perspective leading into this movie. There's nothing, like there's nothing about this movie that's like, oh, like there's no plot line in this movie where they're like, yeah, we're like, they're, look at these, like there's no plot line in this movie where they're like attacking like people on the internet that are like right wing or left wing. Like, it's just so stupid. Like, it reminds me when the first movie came out, and there were like these silly articles that were like, look at this movie is appealing to like white incel right wing yada 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 whatever. And it's like, and they were silly articles, and it's like, what are you talking about? This is Todd Phillips just making a movie. It's like, what? It's not necessarily, it has nothing to do with like right wing or left wing or yada yada yada. And like, now you have like the inverse, where it's like, now in my opinion the anti-woke crowd have become the new SJWs, where they're like, just where they have to just like find phantoms, that like left-wing phantoms to fight with. And it's just like, not everything's about you. And this isn't about you. This is just a movie about Arthur Fleck. He's not a representative of you. He's a representative of some of the most damaged individuals in our society. And there's a movie about, like, the first movie was about his impact on society, and this movie is just about the society's impact on him and their expectations of him, and the harsh reality that he can't live up to those expectations. He's just a damaged individual. So anyways, I think I've yapped long enough. Let me know what you think about the movie in the comments down below. Seriously, if you hate the movie, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where you may or may not disagree with me. And by the way, I will just cut off some of the comments where people are like, "Oh, I knew what to come in. I knew what to expect going into the movie. I just didn't think it was good." That's fair. I don't really. If you just think the script is bad and the performances are bad and the cinematography is bad and whatnot, and you just thought it was poorly executed, that's perfectly reasonable. I'm not trying to dismiss those opinions. I am kind of trying to dismiss the opinions of the people that went into this movie expecting a Joker movie, because I don't really think there was any indication that this was ever going to be that. Anyways, love you. I don't know why I said I love you, because I don't actually know you. I'm not creating a parasocial relationship. I do appreciate you, though. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.